Hello everyone, it's me, Nikki, and welcome to my channel. Today I'm doing a book review, hopefully, because I'm not good at them, but I try my best. But the book I'm going to review is The Girl on the Velvet Swing, Sex, Murder, and Madness at the Dawn of the 20th Century. First off, I really enjoyed this book. It was interesting, and like I said before, I sort of heard about the case, and this went into more depth, obviously. And like a lot of true crime, they give biographies on most of the major players involved. So, this is about Evelyn Nesbit, who was a chorus girl in 1901. And she was 16 years old. She was with Stanford White, who was 47 and married. And he was a prominent architect in New York City. So he was like a celebrity of his day. After drinking some champagne, Evelyn lost consciousness and awoke to find herself naked in bed with White. Telltale spots of blood on the bed sheets told her that White had raped her. We'll get into that. And then she didn't tell anyone until, I think it was 2 years later. She told Harry Thaw, who would become her husband. And then in 1906, Thaw killed White at Madison Square Garden. Not the current version, an older version. And then there was a trial to decide basically whether he was insane or not. And it says Evelyn Nesbit's testimony was so explicit and shocking that President Teddy Roosevelt himself called on the newspapers not to print it in verbatim, but they'd already done that. So, let's get started. So that's the cover. This is the hardback edition, and it is by Simon Batts, I believe, is how you pronounce that. Oh, let me make sure my Facebook thing is turned off. It is. So I was just going to take little notes like I normally do, but this one got me so heated. I was like, no, we have to take a lot of notes and talk about it. So Evelyn was just a kid, obviously. What was her mother's name? I've forgotten. But her mom seemed to be a bit of a stage mom. Her father died unexpectedly, and Florence was obviously ill-prepared because she didn't have an education, she didn't have a job, and they didn't have any money. And Evelyn liked performing, so they were in Pittsburgh or Philadelphia, one of those places, and Evelyn got big there, and so her mom moved her to New York. She has a brother who's not really mentioned. And she was a model in New York with her mother as her agent, and again, a bit stage mom, because permission was rarely denied if people wanted to use Evelyn as a model. She modeled for Carol Beckworth, George Gray Bernard used her as a model for his marble figure Innocence, and Charles Dana Gibson, the Gibson Girls, portrayed Evelyn in several of his classic illustrations, which I think, and there are pictures scattered throughout. Let me find one. And it's not always of like, there's pictures of buildings that White worked at. Oops. Oh, here we go. So she was kind of, I wouldn't say famous, but she was at least well known in the artistic circles. And there's this one. So, and then she was pretty naive, poor Evelyn. And when she's being introduced to Stanford White by an older woman, older like in her 20s, who's also in the whatever they are in together. It's kind of obvious to a modern reader exactly what White wants to happen, but Evelyn, because she's 16, she's pretty naive. Maybe she just wants to think the best of people. She doesn't see it. She's not attracted to White at all. When she first meets, there's another guy there, and she likes him a lot better. She even dates a Barrymore. Let me find. I think it's John Barrymore. Yeah, I think it's John who Evelyn dates, which is pretty cool. I didn't expect to have the Barrymores in here. Yeah, he's famous because he's obviously a Barrymore, but Ethel and Lionel were more famous as actors. And he is Drew Barrymore's grandfather. Yes. And John, in the book, it's explained all about him as well. It sort of sets up stuff for Harry, why Evelyn would like him. Now, there is grooming in this book. I have never been groomed by an older man, so I'm not sure how much, but there is grooming. White is not only grooming Evelyn, he's grooming the mother, because he goes, oh, she can live with me. Oh, I'm rich. I'll rent you an apartment. I'll send your son to school. We'll send Evelyn to school at some point. You know, anything you need. You need to go back to your family in Pittsburgh? Here, ticket, go, stay. So he might be grooming the mother more than even Evelyn. But he gives Evelyn nice things, and I think her mom is always like, well, just go with him because he's doing all this stuff for us. He even gets to be her guardian when her mom's not there, so it's like really creepy. There is a sexual assault, obviously. She is drugged. Possibly. I'm not sure if she's ever had champagne before, but something has definitely slipped into her drink, and he is super gross. And I got a note here for page 39. He says not to tell anyone, like they always do. So she wakes up naked, sees blood, and starts freaking the fuck out, as anybody would. And he's like, shh, 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 keep quiet. It's all over now. Now you belong to me. Like, bro, you're so pretty, so young, so slim. I love you because you are so young and slim. Forget it, little girl. Ugh. And then she doesn't tell her mother because, like, how at the moment that must have been so. It's hard nowadays for women or men to tell their anybody that they've been raped. I can only imagine how hard it must have been back then. Okay, so she eventually goes back to him. He called on her the next afternoon. He seemed abashed and ashamed, and Evelyn received him in silence. And then she asked, does everybody that you know do these things? Yes, they all do. All the dancers in her thing? Yes. Like everybody that she knows. He goes, yes, they all act this way. All of them. Which I think feels like more grooming. So she keeps seeing him, and I believe sleeping with him. I'm not 100% certain on that. She does, like, kiss him a lot. So I assume that's still going on, but that's not ever explicitly stated. But she thinks she's special. Like, she thinks he gives her, like, jewelry or takes her out and has all these parties with her, but she thinks she's special, that he's the only one he treats this way. Then she finds out she's not. He has like a little black book full of names of people she works with, her friends, whatever. And that's pretty much when she starts dating Barrymore. And White does not like this. He tries to keep Evelyn to himself. Obviously, the Barrymores had problems. John, I think he did a Hamlet that everybody liked, but he never really, like I said, got to Lionel and Ethel levels. I believe he had a drinking problem and like money issues and all this stuff. And they even got like, I don't want to say engaged, but like that was the assumption. But then White sends her to Europe or something. I'm not 100% sure. He gets rid of her. Barrymore forgets about her, and she forgets about him. And then somewhere in there, he sends her to school. That's right. So she comes back because she had appendicitis, which everybody was like, oh, like later on, they were like, oh, she's pregnant. And they were like, no, she had appendicitis. It's okay. So she's forgotten about Barrymore. Barrymore's forgotten about her. And that's when Harry Thaw steps in. He's like Barrymore, but not famous. He's like famous in Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, whatever the fuck. He comes from a rich family. He's the youngest of 10. His dad had 5 with his first wife and 5 with his second wife. So he's from the second wife. His mother coddles him. He's one of those guys. And White keeps telling her, Evelyn, that Harry has a drug problem and that he is mean to other women that he's been with and all this other stuff. And Harry goes, no, it's not me. White is like that. And Evelyn, still a child, is like, okay. Like, so when Harry tells her that stuff about White, she shuns White. But then when she comes back, because they go to Europe, but when she comes back and Harry's still there and she's not, White tells her all the stuff about Harry and she believes it. So, but anyway, in Europe, Evelyn tells Harry about what happened, and he doesn't care in like the societal sense. Like, he doesn't go, oh, well, you must have dressed provocatively or whatever, but he like flips the fuck out. He is like sobbing and a crying mess and keeps asking her like to repeat it over and over and over again. It's really weird. And then half of it is because I think he loves her in like a weird way. We'll come back to that as well. But also like he really hates White because Thaw is from Pittsburgh, wherever. Not New York. White is like New York, and he won't, because of whatever problems Harry's had, he's been kicked out of all these schools, all this stuff. So he's like low class. So White is like, oh no, he can't come in anywhere. And that makes Harry mad. So they hate each other. And Evelyn's just in the middle of it. And then she comes back home. Everybody knows what the fuck happened. Harry told everybody what White did to her. And she's like, are you fucking kidding me? But of course, White denies it. And Thaw's family is shitty because Evelyn marries him, and his mother and his sisters and maybe like one brother are like, no, we don't know her. And so she's just like sort of tossed around to all these shitty people, and nobody's looking out for her. So I got another note. I should have put tabs in it. Why don't I do that? I'm not a good booktuber. Okay. Oh, yeah. So, at some point, Thaw, before he, like, married Evelyn, he got to Comstock, who was doing all this stuff. It's in the history books, and it was just, like, fucking bullshit. But it all passed, and then they went past it. But, when Thaw kills White, he says, I did it because he raped my wife. So everybody's like, oh, okay, because she was underage. This is what Comstock says. The prosecution of wealthy pedophiles was long overdue. It's 2021. There are a ton of wealthy pedophiles. Are you fucking kidding me? It's never happened. So they get married, and he waits and waits, and then they're at a Madison Square Garden that White helped build, since been torn down, and Harry just goes up and puts 3 bullets in him, and then just stands there like this, and he goes, I did it because he hurt my wife. And then some people take him to jail, and he's like, where are you taking me? It's like, you just shot a man. You have to go to jail. So there's a trial, and it's a fucking shit show. First of all, he's got Harry has a bunch of lawyers at one point, and he is just, Harry's the fucking worst. They want to say he was insane, and he goes, I'm not insane. Like, yeah, you are. He was insane in some way or another, and he hated White, and I don't know if he hated him. He just hated him. Doesn't matter if he ever did anything to Evelyn or not, but he did. So then Evelyn takes the stand, because I think in the first trial, they were like, they didn't do the guilty by insane, they just wanted a not guilty. So Evelyn takes the stand, and everybody is like, oh, she's about to, because she's still like 18, 19, just a baby. And she's like, she's not been, well, she has been coached by the lawyers, like how to present yourself. And so Harry's lawyers are asking her, she goes into great detail, which is then printed in the papers, which is then circulated around the country. And that's when Teddy Roosevelt is like, can you please? But it's too late. And then the DA is like, I don't want to do this, but I'm going to. He'd been reluctant. His name was Jerome. That was his last name. Had been reluctant to cross-examine Evelyn, hoping to save her from the humiliation that would be the consequence of his interrogation. Yeah, 150. Okay. But her obstinacy, her refusal to answer his questions, annoyed and irritated him. He did not know the nature of her relationship with White, but he was certain that the rape never occurred as she described it. So, this is important. Everyone isn't... Like, if this happened now, they would be like, oh, well, she dressed in a short skirt, so obviously he couldn't control himself. Even if she was 16, they would be blaming her instead of the guy. Nobody does that. They all feel really sorry for her, and they think, like, he took advantage, but they don't think he raped her. So they're not... Nobody ever blames Evelyn for what happened. But nobody ever really believes her. Her own mother doesn't believe her and actually testifies for the DA against her. Because, oh, but he, like, was so nice to us. And I'm like, bitch. Everyone, it was just... So they all, like... Maybe they even believe she was raped. They just don't believe he did it because of who he was. So I got really fucking mad about that. I don't know why I have these pages marked. But I do. Probably because they were just talking more shit about her. And, you know, she did it. She was on the stand for a couple of days, you know, for her husband's side and then the DA. So, I don't remember why I marked 174 and 175. This is why I really should get better at this. Oops. Nope, those are the pictures. Yeah, she told him in 1903, and then he killed White in 1906. So he basically had like 3 years. But anyway, the trial was not an acquittal. It was a draw. They couldn't come, a hung jury. They couldn't come to a decision. So they went to the second trial. And this time, his lawyers were like, he's fucking crazy. He has been crazy since he was a baby. He's crazy now. He didn't know what he was doing. Or if he did, it's because he's crazy. So then the sort of second half of the book and the second trial is less about Evelyn in total, but more about Harry and how that affects Evelyn. So the second trial, they like, everybody comes up, oh yeah, Harry was always such a weird baby. And they said he had epilepsy, and then they claimed that was a mental illness, which maybe that's what they thought, but that's awful. So they claim that had something to do with it, and I'm sure epilepsy obviously does something to your brain, but it doesn't make you insane. And I marked page 200, where they bring up what could be wrong with him. I don't know if they had a... It said, or if they had a name for it back then. Thaw's behavior alternated between two polar opposites. He would be deeply depressed, sitting motionless for hours at a time, sunk in a death-like torpor. Yet on other occasions, he would behave excitedly, frantically engaged in some task to the exclusion of everything else. And you've sort of seen signs of that. So that seems like bipolar. I'm not 100% sure. But it seems like bipolar. And then there was somewhere else, maybe it was even his the Wikipedia, I looked up, something for there, or it might be in the book. He was definitely like a narcissist, as well, and he was, what's the word for it? He was able to get his mother to do almost anything for him. She, like, paid for all of his lawyer, obviously. But even before he was in jail, he was like, oh, Mom, I need money. And she would give him money. And she could never believe he did anything wrong ever. Like, she goes, the only thing he ever did wrong was marrying her. So again, Evelyn has to testify. And this time they find him guilty but insane. And then he's fucking surprised when they come and get him to take him to an asylum. Like, what the fuck did you think was gonna happen? I guess they thought he would be able to go to one they picked out, so like a fancy one, but everybody was like, no, he's a dangerous man from what you've just told us. So he goes to this one, which is, of course, right here. I don't know if it's there anymore. It had a capacity for 550 patients, but there were 700. So, your asylum, bullshit from the 1900s. Overcrowded, just like prisons. There's a section where Evelyn goes to visit Harry, and she walks through the women's section, and they're like fucking chained to walls and naked, and there's piss and shit everywhere. So not great. People aren't great either. Obviously, they don't give a shit. Because there's two. They probably never gave a shit. The staff and stuff. They try to get a writ of, they call it something specific, but they basically want to get him out. Like, he's been in there for some time, and then go, oh, he's not crazy anymore, you can let him out. But he hadn't changed, so they say no. And again, he was like, but he didn't he didn't let the doctors do anything. He tried to, violated the regulations, all this stuff. And then his mom is like, well, shit. So she starts a campaign to remove the guy in charge. And it works. And she gets another guy. And he's like, nah, your son's fucking crazy. And I wrote here, the second half is a lot about Harry, and honestly, it's interesting, but because he's a piece of shit, I don't really care. So he's still in there for a couple of years, and then he breaks out. And it's really fucking easy. Like, this is an insane asylum where some of the worst criminals, or whatever they thought back then, should go, and he was able to just slip out the front gate, hop in a car, and then he booked it up to Canada. And then during that trip, a police or sheriff saw him and was like, and he's like, no, I'm free. And then Evelyn's terrified because during all this, she's changed her testimony. She said White never raped her, and that her husband has threatened her, which is true, and that if he ever got out, he'd hurt her. She's had a child at some point, which she says is his, but it is not. It is somebody else's, which is fine. And then also it has come out during these attempts to get Harry out that he was in fact a drug addict, and he did in fact whip and hurt women around 14 to 16. So him and White weren't all that different. White was just richer and nicer and not crazy. Well, he probably was crazy, but you know what I mean. So she's taken everything back, and now she's afraid. Well, Harry's up in Canada, and then they find him, and then Canada's like, no, we don't want him. But the people of Canada like him, and the people in like New York, Boston, everywhere he goes like him because of what he did. He killed the man that raped his wife. So, but the governments and the people in charge are like, can you please? Can you not? So eventually he gets sent to New Hampshire, because that's the closest, I think. And New Hampshire's like, we don't want him either, Canada. Because Canada just like fucking kicked them out in the middle of the road. And then he got to New Hampshire. So then there's a whole trial about that. And they're like, no, you have to go back to New York. And then I think they say he's not insane. So then the actual New York police grab him and put him in jail. And it's like a whole shit show of him trying to get away. And he never remarried, I don't believe. He actually got in trouble for not murdering. He what did he do? He assaulted a Fred Gump. I know. In 1917. Gump was 19 years old. He'd met Thaw at a ice cream parlor in Long Beach, and Gump wanted to be an architect, and Harry says he knew Carnegie and an engineering school, or he wanted to be an engineer. That's right. So then Gump goes to New York to meet Thaw, and then they go to a hotel, or he meets him at a hotel. And Thaw says, you are my slave now, you will submit to me, won't you? And he started whipping him. And then he'd beaten his victim and went to bed. At 2 o'clock, he escaped the hotel. Or no, next morning after breakfast, he escaped the hotel. And so he just went home. And Thaw ran away and tried to kill himself. And that did not work. So they put him in a sanitarium. The Court of Common Pleas committed Thaw indefinitely to the Pennsylvania Hospital for the Insane, a private asylum. He obviously enjoyed a privileged existence, even traveling. And then he died in the 40s, and he basically left Evelyn nothing. They'd gotten divorced, and she'd gotten remarried. But yes, he died and was like, here, Evelyn, fuck you. So Evelyn married Jack Clifford, but I don't believe they divorced. They might have just separated. And she never really had the success that I think she wanted. She was on vaudeville, and she did, looks like 8 films in the silent movie industry. So she was sort of famous, but unfortunately she fell into drug use, specifically cocaine, and she actually reconciled with her mother because she was like, I'm gonna take your kid, and she was like, oh, I actually love my son. So she cleaned herself up, and she worked as a singer in a nightclub. And then she worked on... Oh, Harry died in 1947 at 76. And basically nobody attended. Because fuck him, that's why. And her son moved to Los Angeles and she moved with him. She doted on her grandchildren. And then they were going to make a movie, which you may have heard of, with Joan Collins, the girl on the red velvet swing. And she worked on that as a consultant. And then she died in 1967 at age 82 of natural causes. So, it didn't really go the way she'd hoped, I think. But, you know, she was happy in the end, and that's all that matters. And then there's an afterword, and I got really mad there, because on page 348, it says, "It does not frequently happen that an author is unsure that an event occurred, yet surprisingly, it is impossible to know if the rape, as Evelyn Nesbit described it, did take place." Okay. You're like, okay. And then he goes on, "How is it possible, for example, to explain the interaction between Sanford White and Evelyn after the rape if it had been as traumatic an event as Evelyn claimed?" She admitted on cross-examination that she had seen White several times alone in his apartment after he raped her, and she confessed that she had written letters to White on her travels with Harry. Okay. He just wrote a book about and in the beginning, he fucking groomed her. She was a child. She was 16, and even though she was in New York, she didn't know a lot. He groomed her. He groomed her mother. He told her everyone she knows, everyone she works with does the same thing. Of course she's gonna think that it's okay and keep going to see him. Like, what the actual fuck? So other than that, I liked the writing. I liked the information that was presented. I liked that a bunch of people got biographies, not just our main characters. Like, her mom got one, Harry's mom, the lawyers got one, I think even a judge got one. So, yeah, that afterward made me so fucking heated, and that's why I was like, I have to talk about this. I said I made angry faces at the author. I did. I read it, and I went, what the fuck? Because he... But, yes, read this. Enjoy it. Get fucking mad like I did. See how little has changed about wealthy pedophiles. And, yeah. So that's my, hopefully coherent review of The Girl on the Velvet Swing. I'm glad I could talk about it with people. So, yes, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope that you have a lovely day. I will see you next time. Goodbye.